Kirk, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Good morning, Maria. Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me along to your podcast this morning.
Listen, I have to confess to you something. I mean, we've been working with each other for a little while now, and I love your name. And I now have changed. My blasphemy has improved. Instead of using certain phrase, I say, "Oh, Kirk Kinnell."
Yeah, I'm afraid that's something that's followed me through my life. Yeah, my surname has been used in that kind of manner a few times over the years.
Oh, it's lovely because I don't feel so guilty now. But also, it's a name that nobody will ever forget. I think that's you. Is it? And it's your real name, which is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to have a memorable name, and even when I first, took on different roles in the police, one of the things that followed me through was when I was new in a place, they would say, "Oh, it's the guy with the film star name." Just
Yeah.
not the looks, just not the looks to go with it, but the film star.
You're so modest. You're so modest. So I want to take you back. Actually, I want to take you back to when you first became a police officer. Was that something you wanted to do as a child? Is it something that's in the family? It's a difficult job to choose. So what led you to that?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, growing up in the kind of the East End of Glasgow, certainly the role of a police officer wasn't a kind of family trait. And when I decided to join the police, I was a young bank employee at the time, and I knew then that life for me would only be about the outdoors. I wanted to go to the outdoor world and start engaging people because the bank environment was a bit claustrophobic. Even though it was good for me, I realised that I wanted to go and engage people in a broad, challenging environment. So the police was always a draw for me. I'd thought about it many years as a young guy, but probably thought it was beyond me as a young 16, 17-year-old. But when I eventually got to the age of 21 and matured a wee bit more, that's something that made me, I was compelled to at least apply and was fortunate enough to be successful.
And you've went into the armed response vehicles role. Tell me what that is. I I can guess, but what is that?
Yeah, so as a young cop, I was again a couple of jobs where I saw the armed response vehicles coming to the scene and saw them behaving in a consummate, professional, well-trained way, and realised, well, I like the look of them, I like the look of what they do, but there was something about the role that they performed which was about going after the most dangerous criminals or people in extreme crisis situations, which for me was a big challenge, and I always wanted then to become an armed response officer. And luckily enough, after 3 years police service, I applied and got into the ARVs, and I followed that journey, if you like, through the rest of my career, both as an armed response officer and also as a hostage negotiator, which would follow on later on.
And it's interesting because you got into negotiating because you saw negotiators in action. What was it that impressed you most about it? What did you see that appealed?
Well, I suppose for me, there's a memorable moment. Everyone talks about maybe these teachable moments or memorable moments, but I was at a siege in the south side of Glasgow, and I saw the negotiators and the firearms team were deployed at the same location. They were basically working hand in hand with each other, but I saw that in a position with a man armed with a gun, and where he had turned the gas on, was threatening to blow up the building, the negotiators remained really calm under pressure and were able to connect with this individual, stabilise him, bring him down, and have him come out without causing anyone any harm. And I realised then that they had a skill set in connecting with people on a level which I could only dream of understanding at that stage, because I knew I was good with people, but when I saw the hostage negotiators, I realised that they had something special.
And it's true, actually, because I read when I was preparing to do this talk with you that hostage negotiators have 99.9% success rate. I mean, that's phenomenal. Is that something to do with them? Is it something that's naturally within them? Is it something that they learn? Is it something we can all learn?
Well, I absolutely think it's something that we can all learn. So for me, similar to the armed response vehicles. So when I was initially impressed with the armed response vehicles in terms of the officers, the level of training they had clearly undergone, which was really intense. There's a large volume of their work is spent training and preparing for a job. And I realised that discipline was that if you train hard enough, you will become excellent. Your performance will become excellent rather than just good. And that's something that happened, obviously, in both disciplines of the armed response vehicles and the negotiator world, and something that improved when I took over the negotiator world was to invest more in the training of people so that when they were deployed operationally, their performance levels and the expectation levels were so high that, you know, they followed that process, which by that time had been refined over and over again to the point where it was almost perfect. And, you know, my philosophy is continue the pursuit of excellence. Like every great professional, it's about retrain, and always look to improve.
How do you negotiate with a new rescue dog? Can you give me any tips? So this is his second appearance on a podcast. That's Oscar the rescue dog, for those of you who will now be listening out to podcasts to see if he disrupts us further. So anyway, I think one of the things that you've said in the past is the important thing is listening when you're negotiating. What are you listening for?
Okay, I suppose, well, to lead into that, I think for me the most important thing is to understand the perspective of other people, because if you don't understand them, if they don't feel understood, you'll never connect with them. And the key to understanding them is to listen for, you know, various clues in the conversation that people give away without thinking, because it's part of them. Why would they try and withhold part of them in a dialogue? So negotiators are trained to engage people and listen for all the clues, and all of the clues come from what is their emotions, what are the motivators, what are the things that are driving them, and in hostage negotiating instance, what is it that's driving them to exhibit the behaviour that we can see today? Something's happened that's caused this, it's had an impact on the person. They might well be at the edge of a bridge contemplating suicide, they might have taken something hostage, but we'll focus on their behaviour and try and understand what it is that's driving that behaviour, because if we can't understand what makes them want to die, we can never understand what the solution would be to help them want to live. So it's really about listening for all the things that drive people. And so we train negotiators to listen for various levels of things so that we can find key words and phrases and then interpret that as something that's motivating them, and we teach them that skill.
Fantastic. What happens though if you're dealing with somebody who may not be mother tongue English, who might have different keywords and phrases? How do you deal with that?
Well, actually, sometimes that's really helpful, because we either use an interpreter, but if it's someone where English is their second language, that's really helpful, because they will probably select their words more carefully than people who speak naturally in English. So they might well be more stilted. But the way that you can validate that is by checking your understanding with them. You might say something along the lines of, it seems to me that you are very frustrated. You know, I get the sense that you're feeling betrayed or angry or hurt today because of this event or that event. And if you phrase the question in that way, they will either agree with you, or if you're wrong, they will correct you and put you back on track, so that we don't ever make judgments based on assumptions. We'll always validate that assumption as best we can, so that we turn that assumption into a fact, or as close to a fact, so that we know we're following the right path. So I think the key for that is never make assumptions of what you understand a phrase to mean.
Fantastic. And are these techniques easy to learn?
Yes, obviously with training. So I would say that the techniques are not complicated, but they are complex. You have to understand them in the context of the situation, in the context of the behaviour, and most importantly, in the context of the perspective of the person that you're speaking to. Because actually, you know, speaking to Kirk Kinnell today or Maria Franzoni today, it might well be a different one that you meet tomorrow, depending on events or moods or whatever, or mindset. So you have to just deal with what's in front of you, confirm that, and then connect with the person and influence them in a way that's a solution for them as well as a solution for you, which is the hard bit, closing the deal.
Yeah, do you know, I like that. That's really interesting, because you're right. I mean, there are lots of Maria Franzonis. You know, I thought that was a problem, but actually, no, it's probably normal.
No, you're not unique. It's for us all.
That's really good. I like it. Is there another technique or skill or tool that you can share with me that I can use, perhaps, that's quite easy to teach me?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example of an indirect question, and you can maybe play along with me and see if you understand where this is going, and I'll summarise at the end of that. So a question that I would ask you, which is indirect. So I'm going to ask you a question, but the answer to your question, or the obvious answer to the question, is not really what I'm looking for. I'm really looking for a summary of your answer. So the question I would ask you is, okay, Maria, tell me about your best boss and why you liked working for him or her so much in the past. Give me someone that you think I would run through brick walls for him or her because they were just my best boss ever. And when you answer this question, before you do so, you'll realise I don't care about your best boss. Actually, what you're really going to tell me is about you and how you like to work. So you're actually talking about yourself. You don't realise you're talking about yourself. You're talking about you think you're talking about your boss. So if you would answer that question just now, I'll summarise how I think you like to work at the end of maybe 30 seconds or 40 seconds.
Okay, well, my best boss actually was my first big boss, and his name is Steve Sumner, and I'm still in touch with him. And he was my best boss because he saw in me things that I didn't see, and he pushed me and challenged me and stretched me, and I achieved much more than I ever imagined because of him and how he managed me.
Okay, so in a short summary, what I would say is, Maria, it seems to me that this is how you like to work. It seems to me that you like to be challenged and pushed, and you like to be motivated to inspire things that you never thought capable of yourself. You know, and it would go on to saying it also feels someone has confidence in you that you don't have in yourself. And you would say, yeah, that is me. That's, you know, you'll recognise on reflection that that's you. So by asking that simple technique of asking an indirect question, you have revealed something about yourself, which probably maybe you didn't realise until you heard yourself saying it out loud. So that technique we would use, you know, on the edge of a bridge, not asking people about their best boss, but asking a question which will reveal something about them that gives me some leverage. So when I speak to you, if I was to ask you to complete a task, I would say, Maria, I would really like you to complete task A, but it needs someone who, you know, maybe hasn't done this before, but don't worry, I'll give you full support. You will have my full confidence, but I know that you're the only person that can achieve this, but go on and do it, and don't worry about a thing. And take away all the restrictions that you may be able to place on yourself, and you will go and achieve that task with vigour, because it's what makes you tick.
I love that. Yeah, you've summarised me very well. That's really good. Thank you for that. That's really, really good. I do like that. So what other areas can you use these negotiation skills and techniques in?
Well, since I've completed my 30 years law enforcement career, I've gone into the business world for the last 2 years. And I realised some time ago that these skills were transferable to the corporate world, without doubt. And I have taken these skills and given them to people in the finance sector, in the sales sector, in the engineering sector. I have been also given talks at Cambridge University, St Andrews University, HEC in Paris, St Gallen University. So everywhere where there are people who are seeking to improve their communication skills, their understanding of other people, is where, you know, my voice can be heard. And so it's not restrictive. Wherever there are people, you can benefit from negotiation skills. But the ingredient for that would be the organisations who hire me in to coach really have to recognise that their staff, there's improvement to be had. You know, it's usually people who are keen for never-ending learning.
Now, I am curious now, you must have a fantastic relationship with your family, because obviously you've got these negotiation skills. Do you apply your techniques at home?
Well, let me tell you a really funny story. So I have occasionally come home, and I was head of the hostage negotiator unit in Scotland. I was part of the UK lead team. I sat on the global team, which went around the world training negotiation skills all over the world. I've been across to the USA many times, advising law enforcement on conflict resolution and negotiation. So I would say I was pretty experienced in terms of hostage negotiation. And yet you tend to get a reality check when you come home and your family tell you that you're the worst negotiator in the world. And they can't even believe I'm a negotiator sometimes, the conversations that we have. But I think the key to that is when you're emotional. When I'm emotional about an issue at home, then I don't think about my training. It's a different mode that you switch into. So I'm a normal person like you or everyone else there, that when I become emotional with a family situation, some of the stupid things will come out my mouth also, and so it's forgivable.
That's my problem. I'm Italian, so I'm very emotional. So I have to work on the emotion bit.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
So tell me, how do you actually do your presentations? How do you ensure that they are memorable? How do you make it an experience for people?
Well, believe it or not, so for me, I've tried to ensure that my presentation style is as good as it can be. And one of the things that I learned is that people remember points when there's some sort of memorable moment, or at least there's fun involved in the training. I heard from a neuroscientist who told me that children are like sponges up to the age of 7. And the reason that they slow down at the point of 7 is that we stop making it fun for them. We actually make it a bit of a task and a bit of a chore. So when you can make learning fun, that's when people take things in most. So through most of my presentations at the key points, I role play, I go through scenarios, but in some way I make it interactive and I bring a bit of humour. Sometimes it's serious, but I think the important thing is that people learn in an environment that's comfortable for them, because if I'm going to teach negotiations, if I'm going to teach people skills to people, and one of the things I teach is the perspective of others is the most important thing for me. I need to recognise that the perspective of my audience is more important than my presentation and my point. And so when I focus on them and what their needs happen to be for that particular scenario, that's when I get most of the learning. And that's reaffirmed by the feedback that I get from them that says, that was really impactful, that changed my perspective on life, because it's something that they get involved in too. So for me, the point is when I get them immersed in the training, the same level that I'm at, then that's when it sticks with them the most, and it makes massive changes.
Fantastic. That sounds brilliant. And are there particular audiences that you find benefit most from this?
Well, I've been surprised over the last couple of years, believe it or not. So I maybe had a bit of trepidation coming from law enforcement into the corporate world that may, clearly the audience would be different. In law enforcement, you basically instruct people, but in the corporate world, you have to get them involved and teach them. But I've taught across a broad range of businesses and actually been pleasantly surprised that all of them have different but similar needs. And yeah, so every sector, this is applicable to every sector and every business. Everywhere there's people.
Fantastic. And you've obviously been speaking for a short time within the corporate and business world, although you've been speaking and training, as you said, in the world of the police for a long time. What advice would you give yourself if I could put you in a time machine and send you back when you started presenting and teaching and coaching? Now that you know what you know, what would you do differently, or what would you say to the young Kirk?
Probably the young Kirk, I would give advice to spend more time understanding other people, because maybe as a young man became enthusiastic and keen and you think you know it all, but always as you become a bit older and a bit wiser, you recognise that the perspective of other people is much more significant than you realise. That's when you become more comfortable in your own skin. You become a bit more, I remember as a young cop giving people advice that I'd learned from a book, and I remember people looking at me when I was going to domestic incidents, and I could see them saying, you don't have the same level of life experience as me. How can you give me such strong advice or be so focused on that? And probably it's the combination of that and with a bit of humility. Recognise that people have got different reasons for having their opinion, and respect that.
That's actually a life lesson there. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you very much.